I arrived at Dust Creek Ranch on a warm afternoon when the sun hung low enough to turn the dirt road into a river of gold. My old pickup rattled the whole way in, sounding like it was holding itself together out of pity more than machinery. I had $20 in my pocket, a duffel bag full of clothes that didn't fit right, and a heart that had been tired for longer than my 24 years should have allowed. Life hadn't given me many soft corners to rest in, but I had always believed that if I kept moving, something somewhere would finally feel like mine. The ranch stretched out wider than anything I'd ever seen. Fences ran like silver threads over the hills. Horses grazed with the calm wisdom of creatures that understood time better than humans ever could. The air smelled of hay, dust, and something older, a lingering breath from generations of hands that had worked these fields before me. It wasn't quiet exactly. It was the kind of silence that held the world still, like the earth was waiting to see what I would do next. I stepped out of the truck and felt a calm I didn't recognize. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was just exhaustion. I'd grown up poor, and poor kids learn early that the world doesn't bend much for them. But I'd also learned how to survive, how to keep going, how to find warmth in unexpected places. A part of me had always loved the LGBTQ folks I met along the way. Friends, neighbors, people who talked to me with openness I didn't always get from straight men. I admired them. Something in me softened around them. But I never let myself think too deeply about why. The ranch office was a small wooden building leaning a little to the left, like age had pushed on it for years. When I walked in, a single fan spun lazily above the desk, stirring the scent of old paper, saddle oil, and sun-baked wood. A few ranch hands nodded at me, their expressions unreadable in the way older countrymen often were. Friendly enough but cautious, studying me like they were deciding if I'd last longer than the last new hire. My name on a clipboard. My job written in faded ink. A bunkhouse key. That was all I needed. Work meant money, and money meant options. I didn't expect anything more than long days, sore muscles, and nights where I'd fall asleep too tired to think. But as I stood there, taking in the landscape through the dusty window, I felt something I couldn't explain. Like fate had been waiting for me here, tapping its foot with crossed arms. The bunkhouse was simple. Metal beds, worn blankets, the soft hum of a radio someone left on the windowsill. I claimed the corner bed because I'd always felt safer tucked away, where I could breathe without eyes on me. I wasn't ashamed of anything exactly, but I'd spent my whole life trying to fit into a straight world that never felt sized for me. I liked people, men, women, everyone, but I carried parts of myself quietly, like folded notes I wasn't ready to read aloud. As evening settled, the sky turned a deep orange, then purple. The ranch glowed like it was painted in old memory. I stepped outside and felt the wind brush my face gently, almost welcoming. Something about this place whispered that my life was about to turn in a direction I didn't see coming. I didn't know then that the person who would change everything was already watching me. But Dust Creek Ranch knew. And somehow I think it had been waiting. I met Tom on my first full morning at Dust Creek Ranch. I had barely rubbed the sleep from my eyes when I stepped outside the bunkhouse and found him standing near the corral, hands on his hips, sunlight catching the edges of his shoulders like it had been waiting just for him. 30 years old, tall, athletic, and built like someone carved from years of honest work. He didn't look at me at first. He studied the horses, the barn, the sky. Then he turned, and when his eyes landed on me, something in the air tightened. It wasn't the usual quick once-over a foreman gives a new ranch hand. It was slower, deeper, like he was reading something on my face I didn't realize was written there. "You Jack?" he asked, voice steady and low. I nodded, suddenly aware of how young I must have seemed next to him, how my worn clothes clung to me after a night's sleep in heat that didn't let up. "Good," he said. "We start early here." The words were simple enough, but his eyes lingered the whole time. Steady, calm, too observant. There was no judgment in his stare, but it pulled at me anyway, stirring something I didn't have a name for yet. We worked side by side that morning. He showed me how Dust Creek did things, how to loop rope the way he preferred, how the horses responded to tone, not volume, how the tools had a place and a rhythm. He never raised his voice. He wasn't the shouting type. Instead, he watched closely. When I lifted a feed bag wrong, he stepped in behind me, correcting my stance with a hand on my back. My heart jumped, but I kept my face still, pretending it didn't affect me. "You'll hurt yourself like that," he murmured. His breath brushed my neck, and I swallowed hard. I'd been around plenty of men in my life, but something about Tom's presence felt different. Steady, grounding, quietly powerful. I caught myself wondering what he saw when he looked at me like that, but I pushed the thought away and focused on the work. By midday, sweat had darkened both our shirts. The sun pressed down like it meant to test us. Tom worked without complaint, without pause, as if he'd been born into this land. I tried keeping up, never wanting to give him reason to think I wasn't worth the trouble of training. During lunch, we sat under a half-rotted awning while the other ranch hands traded stories. A pair of older workers, men with worn faces and voices shaped by decades of wind, kept glancing between Tom and me. One leaned toward the other and muttered, not quietly enough, "Foreman's watchin' the new kid awful close." The other shrugged. "He don't take interest in nobody." "Not usually." Interest. The word struck deeper than it should have. I kept my eyes on my plate, pretending not to hear, but my cheeks warmed. Tom didn't say anything. He didn't correct them. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me again. Steady, unreadable, but not unkind. Later that afternoon, he asked me to help repair a fence on the far side of the property where the wind swept the grass into long silver waves. We worked in quiet, our hammers the only sound between us. Every now and then, I caught him watching me from the corner of his eye, as if trying to understand something I didn't know I was showing. "You're different from most hands who come through here," he said finally. "Different how?" I asked. He smiled, small but genuine. "Don't know yet." That should have scared me. Instead, it made my chest feel warm. Tom's eyes stayed on me a little too long again. And for the first time, I didn't mind. The long workdays at Dust Creek Ranch had a way of wearing a man down and opening him up at the same time. You spend enough hours under the same sun with the same person, and the distance between you shrinks whether you mean for it to or not. That's what happened with Tom and me. Day after day, job after job, we moved together through the rhythm of ranch life, and before I realized it, he'd slid quietly into the empty spaces of my thoughts. It started with small things, little moments so quick they shouldn't have mattered. Our hands brushing when we passed tools. Our shoulders touching when we worked side by side at the trough. The way our eyes met whenever I said something that made him laugh, even just a little. He didn't smile easily, but when he did, it felt like someone caught the sun and held it still for one breath longer than nature intended. One afternoon he called me into the barn to help reset some equipment. Dust motes floated through shafts of sunlight, turning the whole place into something almost holy. The barn smelled of old wood, hay, and the sweat of years, strong, grounding, familiar. Tom stood with his arms crossed, studying me in that quiet way he had, his attention like a physical thing. "You're tying it wrong," he said, nodding toward the rope I'd looped around a post. "I did it like you showed me," I answered, though I knew my voice wavered. "Close," he murmured, stepping forward. He reached behind me, his chest brushing lightly against my back as he guided my hands. His fingers wrapped over mine. Steady, warm, undeniably gentle for a man built like him. My breath hitched before I could stop it. His presence was too close, too solid, too deliberate. I felt the heat of him through both our shirts, and my knees nearly went weak. "This knot won't hold the way you tied it," he said, voice low near my ear. "You're strong, but you rush. Slow down." It should have been a simple correction. Nothing more than a foreman training a new hand. But with Tom so close behind me, his breath grazing my skin, my body carried the moment deeper than my mind could make sense of. I swallowed, hard, and tried to pretend I didn't feel my pulse hammering in places I didn't want to think about. When he finished, he didn't step back right away. He held still, as if debating something silently. Then, with a slow exhale, he moved past me, brushing my shoulder on the way. I felt that touch for the rest of the day. The tension only grew from there. Every time I looked at him, he was already looking at me. When he spoke my name, it carried a weight I didn't understand. When he stood close, it felt intentional. I told myself I was imagining it, that it meant nothing, that I was reading too much into a man who probably treated everyone this way. But the truth lived deeper than logic. That night, lying on the thin bunkhouse mattress, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment in the barn. The press of his chest, the weight of his hands guiding mine, the warmth in his voice. Over and over, I heard him say, "Slow down." And something in the way he'd said it felt like a message meant for more than just rope. I stared at the ceiling, heart still restless. I didn't know what Tom wanted from me. I didn't know what I wanted from him. But I knew this. Something had changed in that barn. Something small. Something dangerous. Something that refused to let me sleep. The storm rolled in faster than any weather I'd seen on the ranch. 1 minute, the sky was a dull gray, and the next it was swollen with heavy clouds ready to burst. Tom and I had been working near the west pasture when the wind started whipping the grass sideways. The horses grew restless, ears flicking, senses sharpening in ways nature taught them long before humans ever thought to predict storms. "We need shelter," Tom said, voice steady but urgent. He pointed toward the main barn. "Move." We sprinted across the field just as the first crack of thunder split the sky open. Rain came down in sheets, cold and merciless, soaking us before we even reached the barn doors. Tom pushed them open, and we stumbled inside, slamming them shut behind us. The sudden darkness was broken only by flashes of lightning through the cracks in the wood. Rain hammered the roof like fists demanding entry. Every boom of thunder vibrated through the beams. The horses inside shifted nervously, hooves scraping the floor. Tom ran a calming hand over the nearest mare, whispering something I couldn't hear, his voice low and gentle in a way that didn't match his rough exterior. He turned to me once the animals settled, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked shaken. Not scared exactly, just stripped down. "Honest, bro. You all right?" I asked. He nodded, but his jaw clenched. "Hate storms like this. Always have." Surprised me. Tom never showed weakness. He was the kind of man who moved through the world like no weather could touch him. Seeing fear in his eyes felt like witnessing something sacred, something not meant for everyone. He leaned back against a wooden post, the dim light carving new angles on his face. I walked closer, instinct pulling me toward the version of him he didn't show to others. We stood shoulder to shoulder, the air between us charged like the storm outside. "It's the helplessness," he said after a long silence. "Storms take control away from you. I've never liked not being in control." I understood more than he knew. I'd lived most of my life trying to control what parts of myself I showed, what pieces I hid. The fear of losing grip wasn't foreign to me. It was home. Another rumble shook the building. I flinched slightly, and Tom noticed. He let out a breath that softened his whole posture. "Funny," he murmured. "I always thought strength was about never letting anything get to you." He paused, voice quieter. "Then you showed up." My chest tightened. "Me?" He nodded, still staring at the floor like the words embarrassed him. "You're easy to be around. I haven't felt that in a long time. I guess I wanted someone I could trust. Someone who wouldn't judge me for being myself." I swallowed hard as our shoulders pressed, just barely touching. His warmth seeped into me, steadying something unsteady inside. Our breathing fell into the same slow rhythm, the kind that only happens when two people aren't fighting the truth anymore. A flash of lightning illuminated his profile. His eyes lifted toward mine, searching, asking, almost pleading. I knew what would happen if I leaned even a fraction closer. I felt it in the air, the pull, the invitation, the promise of something neither of us had spoken aloud. For a heartbeat, we hovered in that charged space. Then fear surged through me, fear of myself, of him, of what crossing that line would mean. I stepped back. Tom's face tightened. Not angry, just hurt in a quiet way that cut me deeper than any storm ever could. Outside, the thunder quieted. But inside, everything between us had changed. And we both knew it. The morning after the storm, the ranch looked washed clean, but nothing inside me felt the same. The sky was bright, the air crisp, and the earth soaked with new life. Yet I walked around with a heaviness I couldn't shake, a weight made of things I couldn't name out loud. Tom barely spoke to me that morning. He was polite, professional, distant. I tried to convince myself I preferred it that way, but the truth dug into me like a thorn under the skin. Later that day, a ranch worker named Ellis showed up early to help with the horses. Ellis was one of the younger hands, tall and sharp-featured, with a smile everyone seemed to like. He joked easily, laughed loudly, and walked like he belonged everywhere. I noticed Tom watching him, not with the intensity he reserved for me, but with a friendly warmth that hit me harder than it should have. When Tom leaned in to show Ellis how to secure a saddle strap, the same way he had shown me in the barn, something hot and unfamiliar rose in my chest. Jealousy, unmistakable, undeniable, spread through me like wildfire. I hated the feeling. I'd never been jealous of a man's attention before, not like this. Not with this kind of ache. Ellis laughed at something Tom said, and Tom's smile lingered longer than usual. My stomach twisted. I tried to focus on my own tasks, but my eyes kept drifting back to them. Every time Tom placed a hand on Ellis's shoulder, I felt a quiet sting. Not anger, not resentment, just longing. Deep, confusing longing. When Ellis walked off toward the water pump, Tom turned and caught me staring. Our eyes held for a moment too long. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, hope, confusion, before he looked away. "You all right, Jack?" one of the older hands asked, leaning against a post as if he'd been watching me for a while. "I'm fine," I said quickly. He raised a brow, unimpressed. "Looks to me like you got something on your mind." I shook my head, but he only chuckled, low and knowing. "Storm changed something, didn't it? Happens sometimes. Folks show themselves when thunder shakes them." His words hit their mark, even if he didn't know how deep they landed. I walked away before he could say more. All afternoon, my thoughts spiraled. I kept trying to explain the jealousy away. Maybe I admired Tom, maybe it was respect, maybe I just wanted his approval. But none of those excuses held up. Not when the sight of Ellis standing beside him felt like a hand squeezing my chest. Not when remembering Tom's breath near my ear made my pulse jump. Not when the idea of Tom caring for someone else twisted my insides. By evening, the truth settled in me with quiet certainty, like dust finally drifting to the ground after being stirred for years. I wasn't just straight. Not in the way I had always claimed. Not in the way the world expected of me. I wanted Tom. Not just his attention, not just his presence. I wanted the warmth he showed, the gentleness he hid, the strength he carried. I wanted him the way a man wants someone he trusts, someone he sees, someone he can't help but reach for. Accepting that truth didn't happen in a dramatic burst. Came slowly, painfully, with the weight of years pressing down. But as the sun sank behind the hills, painting the ranch in gold and shadow, I felt something inside me loosen, like a knot I'd carried my whole life finally beginning to unfurl. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of who I might be. I was afraid of losing him. Sunset stretched across Dust Creek Ranch like a spill of copper and rose, softening the rough edges of every fence, every hill, every memory I had carried through the day. I had spent hours trying, and failing, to avoid Tom, hoping distance would quiet the storm inside my chest. But as the light faded, I found myself walking toward the corral instead of the bunkhouse, drawn by something I didn't understand but couldn't resist. Tom stood there alone, leaning against a worn post. The sun cast warm color across his shoulders, making him look almost unreal. Too strong, too steady, too familiar to ignore. He didn't turn when he heard my footsteps, but his posture shifted in a way that told me he knew it was me. "Jack," he said quietly, still looking at the horizon. "We need to talk." My stomach tightened. I stepped closer, the dry earth crunching under my boots. "About what?" He exhaled slowly. "About us." The words hung between us like a held breath. I felt the weight of them settle into my bones. When he finally faced me, his eyes carried something raw, something he'd been holding back for far too long. "I'm gay," he said, voice steady but soft. "Always have been. I don't say it much. Not around here. Folks talk. Folks assume." He paused. "But I need you to know it." My heart kicked hard in my chest. Part of me had suspected, hoped, feared, but hearing him say it aloud changed everything. The world felt sharper, brighter, more dangerous. I swallowed. "Tom, I don't know what I am." My voice cracked, betraying everything I tried to hide. "I've spent my whole life telling myself I was straight because it was easier. But being around you—" I shook my head, unable to finish. He stepped closer, the space between us shrinking until the air felt warm with the heat of his presence. "You don't have to label anything," he murmured. "Not for me." The last light of the day slid behind the hills, and the sky dimmed into deep violet. The only sound was our breathing. His slow and steady, mine uneven like my heart was trying to catch up to my honesty. "What do you want, Jack?" he asked. The question hit me in the chest. Want? I'd avoided it for so long, pushed it down, buried it under fear. But standing there with him, alone, unguarded, I couldn't lie, not even to myself. "I want—" My voice faltered, but I didn't look away. "I want you. I don't understand it all yet, but I'm drawn to you in a way I can't explain." Something softened in his expression, like a wall collapsing quietly. He moved one step closer, our boots almost touching. My breath caught as his chest rose inches from mine. The world narrowed until it was only him. His scent, his warmth, his eyes searching mine with a gentleness I didn't know I deserved. "Jack," he whispered, and the sound of my name in his voice nearly undid me. His hand lifted slowly, giving me every chance to pull back. When his fingers brushed my jaw, warm, calloused, steady, I felt my entire body react. A shiver ran through me, not of fear but of recognition, like my skin had been waiting for this touch. I didn't pull away. Our breaths mingled, matching pace without effort. His thumb traced along my jawline, a small, careful gesture filled with more emotion than anything either of us had said. The air between us ignited, quietly, intensely, undeniably. For the first time, there was no running, no excuses, no hiding. There was only him, only us, and a truth I could no longer deny. The sun was slipping behind the ridge when I found Tom waiting in the quiet corral, the rails casting long shadows across the ground. The air still held the warmth of the day, but something in his posture told me this wasn't going to be an ordinary conversation. He stood with his arms folded, head lowered, like a man rehearsing words he'd held back for far too long. I slowed my steps, unsure if I should speak first. But Tom lifted his gaze the moment he heard the gravel shift beneath my boots. His eyes held that same deep intensity I'd felt since the first day, but now it looked heavier, weighted with something he couldn't keep buried anymore. "Jack," he said quietly, "stay a minute." I nodded and stepped inside the corral with him, the wooden gate closing behind me with a soft creak. The sky glowed orange-pink above us, the kind of sunset that made even the roughest land look gentle. But there was nothing gentle about the tension sitting between us. Tom drew in a slow breath. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this, and I'm no good with talkin' when it's personal." His voice dropped, rough around the edges. "But I can't keep it to myself anymore." My heart thudded hard against my ribs. "Say what?" He looked straight at me, no hesitation left. "I'm gay, Jack. I've known since I was a teenager. Just never said it out loud around here." He let the words settle into the warm evening air. "And I need you to know because of the way I look at you." A wave of heat rolled up my neck. The honesty in his voice wasn't soft. It was raw, like truth torn from a place he'd protected his whole life. I didn't know what to say at first. The world inside me felt like shifting sand. Tom stepped closer, but not enough to touch. Just enough that I could feel the warmth of his body blending with the cooling air. "I don't expect anything from you. I'm not asking you to feel the same. But I needed you to hear it from me." I swallowed hard. "Tom, I don't know what I am. I don't have a label for it. I've always cared about people more than boxes. I took a breath and looked him right in the eye. But I'm drawn to you. I have been for a while. That scares me more than I like admitting. The tension in his shoulders softened. He moved one step closer, slowly, deliberately, giving me every chance to step back. I didn't. My feet felt rooted to the earth. We stood chest to chest now, the warmth of him radiating through the few inches of air between us. Our breath mingled, soft and uneven. The world outside the corral faded. All I could focus on was him. The way the last light caught his jawline, the quiet rise and fall of his chest, the uncertainty hiding behind his strong exterior. "Jack," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "Can I?" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. His hand lifted, slow as a sunrise, until his fingers brushed my jaw, gentle, cautious, trembling just enough to let me know he felt as terrified as I did. The touch wasn't forceful or demanding. It was a question. This time I didn't pull away. I leaned into his hand, my skin warming beneath his thumb. The simple contact sent a rush through me. Fear, relief, longing, recognition, all tangled together. The air sparked between us, deeper and stronger than anything either of us had spoken aloud. For one suspended moment, everything made sense. Not labels, not rules, not expectations. Just him, just us, and a truth that refused to stay hidden any longer. The air between us after Tom touched my jaw felt charged enough to light the whole ranch. Neither of us moved for several breaths, both caught in the quiet understanding that something long buried had finally broken through. When he stepped closer, the last distance disappeared like it was never there at all. I didn't think, I couldn't. Instinct pulled me forward until our foreheads rested lightly together, our breaths mixing in a slow, trembling rhythm. Then Tom's hand slid to the back of my neck, warm and steady, and his lips brushed mine in a hesitant, questioning way. It was soft at first, like he was afraid of startling me. But when I leaned in, truly leaned in, the hesitation broke. The kiss deepened, heavy with every unspoken feeling we'd both carried in silence for far too long. It wasn't rushed or wild. It was thick with emotion, with hunger built from restraint, with relief neither of us had expected to find. His hand cupped my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone as if memorizing it. I clung to his shirt without realizing it, my fingers trembling against the fabric. Every breath felt shared. Every heartbeat felt matched. When he kissed down the line of my jaw, leaving warm, gentle love-bitten marks that made my knees weaken, I felt myself melt into him like he was the place I had been searching for all my life. We found our way into the barn, guided by instinct more than thought. The storm earlier had left the air cool, and the quiet warmth inside wrapped around us like a blanket. Tom pulled me close again, holding me with a firmness that felt protective but never demanding. I had never been held like that, like someone wanted me not out of desire alone, but out of care, out of genuine affection. We kissed again, deeper this time, slow but intense. His hands traced the shape of my shoulders, my back, my waist, exploring in a way that was emotional before anything else. I could feel his heartbeat against mine, strong and steady, as if trying to anchor me to a truth I'd spent years trying to outrun. When he pressed gentle bites along my neck, soft, warm, lingering, I shivered in a way that felt both terrifying and safe all at once. I pulled him closer, burying my face in the curve of his shoulder, breathing in the scent of rain, hay, and something entirely his. The closeness was overwhelming, almost too much, yet I couldn't pull away. I didn't want to. For the first time in my life I felt seen, not as who I thought I needed to be, but as who I truly was beneath every layer of fear. We eventually sank onto a pile of soft blankets stored near the tack room, still wrapped in each other's arms. Our legs tangled naturally, our bodies fitting together like they'd been shaped by the same story. The barn lights cast a warm glow over him, softening the lines of his face until he looked younger, gentler, almost vulnerable. We whispered nothing dramatic, just quiet breaths and small reassurances. the kind that settle into a man's soul and make him feel known. Tom brushed his thumb over my cheek one last time before pulling me against his chest. His warmth seeped into me slowly, like a fire catching. I fell asleep there, safe in his arms, our bodies pressed close, our breaths rising and falling in the same slow rhythm. For the first time in my life, I drifted off feeling wanted. Not for how hard I worked or how much I hid. Wanted simply because I was me. And that night, our walls didn't just fall. They disappeared entirely. The morning after Tom and I fell asleep wrapped around each other, the ranch felt different. Not because anything had changed on the land, but because something had changed in me. I woke before the sun, still in his arms, his breath warm against the back of my neck. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. But when his hand tightened gently around my waist, everything inside me settled into a truth I couldn't deny anymore. We didn't talk about what happened right away. We didn't need to. The way Tom looked at me when we stepped out of the barn said everything. Steady, sure, protective in a way that felt grounding. But Dust Creek Ranch didn't miss a thing. And quiet moments don't stay quiet in a place where eyes are always watching. By noon, the whispers had started. Ellis was the first I noticed. He glanced between us with a knowing look that wasn't unkind, but curious, too curious. Two older ranch hands paused their conversation when we walked by, their eyes dropping to the ground a heartbeat too late. Another man, someone who barely spoke to anyone, muttered, "Told you something was up," as we passed near the stables. Nothing was outright hostile, but the air had changed. People looked longer, spoke softer, watched closer. The ranch wasn't a place where secrets lasted, and suddenly Tom and I weren't doing a good job pretending we were just co-workers. I tried to act normal, but everything between us felt charged now. When Tom brushed past me, even accidentally, heat crawled up my spine. When he spoke my name, there was a gentleness there no one else got. When we worked side by side, our shoulders touched more often than they should have. And anytime someone else talked to me too long, or laughed at something I said, Tom's eyes lingered in a way that made his feelings far too visible. Late that afternoon, one of the older hands, the same man who'd watched me on the day of the storm, approached while I was watering the horses. He leaned on the fence and studied me with an expression somewhere between caution and sympathy. "Ranch ain't blind, kid," he said. "Folks can see when two people start orbiting each other." My heart sprinted. "We're just working," I muttered. He gave me a slow, tired smile. "Work don't make a man look at another man like Tom looks at you, and it sure don't make you look back the same way." I stared at the ground, unsure whether to feel exposed or relieved. "You be careful," he added gently. "Not everyone here understands, but not everyone's against you either. Some of us have lived long enough to know love ain't the enemy." His words stayed with me, settling deep in a place I didn't realize needed reassurance. Still, the tension grew. At lunch, conversations quieted when we sat down. Some men nodded politely. Others avoided eye contact. One made a face like he'd tasted something sour. The divide wasn't sharp, but it was real. Tom noticed every bit of it. That evening, when we finished repairing a broken gate, he placed a firm hand on my shoulder and said, "Let them look." His voice was calm but filled with something fierce. "You're not alone in this." I believed him. Standing next to him, I felt stronger, like we were facing the world shoulder to shoulder, even if we hadn't said the word couple out loud yet. And somehow, without planning it, we began acting like one. Quiet smiles, soft touches no one else got, long glances that told entire stories. The whispers kept coming. But so did the feeling that, for the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was choosing, and I was choosing him. I had just finished brushing down one of the mares when the barn door creaked open. At first, I thought it was Tom coming to find me. He usually did around this hour, some quiet instinct pulling us together even when we pretended it was coincidence. But the footsteps were too hurried, too unsure. When I turned, my breath stopped mid-chest. It was Caleb, a friend from home, someone who knew me before Dust Creek, before the ranch air loosened the knots I'd carried all my life. Someone who remembered the version of me who never questioned who he was, or who he wanted. "Jack?" he said, stunned. I didn't know you worked here." My mouth went dry. "Caleb? What? How did you find this place?" "I was passing through," he said, stepping deeper into the barn. "Heard Dust Creek needed hands. Thought maybe I'd give it a try. Didn't expect to see you." His eyes scanned me. My clothes, my posture, the tension I couldn't hide. Something in his expression shifted. Concern, confusion, curiosity. "You look different," he said slowly. "Ranch life toughened you up or something?" I forced a laugh, but it came out thin. "Yeah, something like that." But the barn door was still open, and a familiar silhouette appeared there for a heartbeat before disappearing again. Broad shoulders, confident stance, the outline so unmistakable it jolted my pulse. Tom had seen us. My stomach tightened. Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Jack, you okay? You're acting like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine, Elid." But pressure was building inside me, fear mixing with something dangerously close to shame. Caleb represented the past I'd tried to grow beyond, a past where I kept everything locked inside because I didn't have the courage to face myself. Being seen with Tom, being known with Tom, terrified me in ways I wasn't ready to admit. Caleb leaned on a stall door. "Your folks miss you, you know? Your brother thinks you're running from something." He chuckled softly. "Guess you always were kind of a mystery." His words felt like hooks pulling me backward. "Running," I repeated quietly. "Maybe I was." Caleb frowned. "You were never one for secrets, Jack. What's going on?" Before I could answer, I sensed Tom behind us. Silent, steady, listening. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. My heart slammed against my ribs with every second he stood there. Hearing conversations not meant for him. Hearing the pieces of a life I'd never let collide with what we were becoming. Caleb sighed. "Look, your family always thought you'd settle down. Get a wife. Build something simple. You're not still planning on that, are you?" The words hit like a slap. Tom shifted just barely. But I heard it, felt it like a crack spreading through wood. My throat tightened. I don't know what I'm planning," I said, struggling for steady breath. "Things changed." Caleb stepped closer. "What changed?" The question was innocent, but it carved straight into the fear I'd been trying to ignore. I saw, in one crushing moment, the two versions of myself colliding, the boy who pretended and the man who had finally let himself want something real. I whispered, "I met someone." Caleb blinked. "Someone?" "A girl from town." Out of instinct, fear, habit, the weight of years, I didn't answer. I didn't say Tom's name. I didn't look back to see his reaction. I stayed silent, and that silence hurt more than any words could. Because behind me, I heard the slow sound of boots turning on dirt. No anger. No accusation. Just quiet disappointment. Then Tom walked out of the barn. Without a word. Without waiting for mine. And the echo of that moment felt like the world collapsing. I spent the better part of an hour walking the ranch in circles, replaying the moment Tom turned away from me in the barn. Every step felt heavier than the last, my chest tight with the weight of what I'd failed to say. The sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving the world washed in a soft blue haze. Crickets hummed. The breeze cooled the sweat on my skin. Everything around me felt calm. Everything except my heart. I checked the bunkhouse first. Empty. Then the corral. Nothing but quiet shadows. By the time I reached the main barn again, night had fully settled in, turning the structure into a dark silhouette against the sky. I pushed the door open slowly. Tom sat on a bale of hay near the far wall, elbows resting on his knees, head bowed. The lantern beside him cast a soft circle of light, just enough to show the exhaustion etched across his face. He didn't look up when I entered. He didn't need to. I felt the distance between us thick in the air. "Tom," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. He didn't move. "You don't owe me an explanation," he murmured. I shouldn't have expected anything. Hearing him sound defeated, him, the strong one, the steady one, cut deeper than anything Caleb's presence stirred up. I walked closer, closing the gap step by step until the lantern light wrapped around both of us. "That's not true," I said softly. You deserved better than silence. He finally lifted his head. His eyes weren't angry, just hurt, steady, and tired, like he'd run out of reasons to hope. I heard everything, he said, and all I could think was, you weren't proud to say it. Proud of us. My throat tightened. It wasn't pride I was missing. It was courage. He shook his head gently. I don't want to be someone you hide from the world, Jack. I've done enough hiding in my life.
I'm tired.
I stepped closer until my knees touched his. Tom, look at me. He hesitated, then met my eyes. The truth poured out before I could stop it. I was scared of losing the version of myself my past knew. Scared of what people back home would say. Scared of being seen fully. But none of those fears matter compared to losing you. He swallowed, jaw tightening in a way that told me he was trying not to break. I knelt in front of him, placing my hands gently on his knees. You're the first person who's ever made me feel like I'm not half finished. Like I'm not something to hide. When I'm with you, I feel whole. His breath hitched just slightly. I choose you, I said firmly, letting the words settle into the barn like a promise. Not out of confusion, not out of fear, out of love. The real kind, the kind that stays. He looked at me for a long moment, every emotion flickering across his face. Pain, hope, disbelief, longing. Then he reached out and cupped my face with both hands, pulling me up into him. The kiss wasn't urgent or wild. It was slow, deep, steady, full of relief and forgiveness and the kind of affection that doesn't need words to explain itself. When we finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. You sure? He whispered. I tightened my grip on his hands.
I'm staying, Tom.
Not just at the ranch. With you. His exhale trembled, like he'd been holding it in for years. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into a warmth that felt like home. And in that quiet barn, under the soft glow of a lantern and the hum of the night, I realized something simple and undeniable. Love hadn't just found me, it had stayed. And so would I,